Watching Soma Spider So What is an infuriating experience, but it's specifically only painful half of the time, and it's the troublesome half that entirely drags down what could have been a genuinely fun comedy adventure. Instead, it'll quickly be lost in the vast amount of mid-tier isekai that's out there. The story is broken into 2 points of view. One is from the eccentric isekai spider girl Kumo, and the other is from the rest of her reincarnated classmates, nearly all of which are humans. Both sides start when their entire classroom is accidentally hit by a cross-dimensional magic attack, so they're all reincarnated in the fantasy world which killed them. While everyone else starts off as human babies, which will need years to properly start their journey, Kumoko is brought back as a spider who can immediately start exploring. Although weak and confused, she quickly becomes self-aware of her isekai situation and the game mechanics which power this fantasy world. This self-awareness and her being born surrounded by monsters to farm will eventually turn her into the overpowered character she's expected to be, and she's having the time of her life doing that. The other reincarnations, however, don't truly start their story for another 15 years. So the human side of the anime, although presented alongside the spider side, is actually in the future. This fact isn't apparent at first and may make you think that the humans might soon stumble upon young Kumoko and join up with her, but that's not the case here, and they have their own isekai adventure going on. So the two perspectives jump back and forth and sometimes show small moments where they collide in some way. It's not a bad thing that the story is set up this way. It would be more reasonable that when you're reincarnated, you'd start off as a child, and at times you have Kumoko's actions unknowingly impacting the future of the human story, which is also interesting. So the time difference isn't the problem with how the anime is portrayed. The problem is that the human story is so unbelievably dull and takes up literally half of the entire show. The characters are all generic fantasy cliches who start off attending school together. The only part of their story that is semi-interesting is the fact that they all know their reincarnations and some have special abilities associated with this. For example, their teacher was also reincarnated and has the ability to see the fates of all her students, so she's trying to prevent them from dying. This catches my attention for about 5 minutes before it cuts back to some contrived betrayal story involving all these characters I feel no strong connection towards in any way. This is a show about a spider girl, and heavily relies on her charm and over-the-top self-aware comedy to keep viewers entertained. Her story focuses on fun and gamified growth, while the human story is meant to contrast this by being more plot-focused and character-driven. It builds up the world and the various problems present within it at the same time as Kumoko's adventure, which normally would be fine and perfectly understandable. But in the human story, the characters are the most cookie-cutter nobodies ever, and if the characters in a character-driven perspective suck, and the plot they move is only standard fantasy elements, then why would anyone care? I understand the human scenes are supposed to be important eventually, as both stories are supposed to connect at some point, but would it have hurt them to balance it out better? Obviously the viewers wouldn't care about the human story, but it still had to be there in some way because that's how it's portrayed in the books. But there's a reason why things get cut when you adapt a story for a different medium. They don't translate well. It can be near impossible to have a direct one-to-one adaptation of a story designed for a different medium. There will always be an element that is neglected. And in this case, the main problem was with connecting the viewers with the humans and their story. So when it becomes clear that these light novel characters don't translate well to anime, maybe learn to cut down their scenes significantly. It's not like they'd upset the light novel fans more. From what I understand, most readers hate its adaptation as well, and believe the human scenes were handled a lot better in the source material, which is understandable. And it doesn't help that the contrast between the two stories makes Kumoko's scenes feel like a reward for suffering through the rest of the show. Honestly, I don't think you ever needed to see the human scenes to make the overall story any more impactful. I'm assuming the only reason why this is told from these two perspectives is so that you could see how Kumoko's actions affect the human story and the eventual connection of their timelines. Without reading the light novels at all, it seems obvious to me that Kumoko somehow becomes this white girl from the human story that's always around the demon lord. And if that's the case, then it would stand to reason that the spider and human perspectives would only exist to show the different views of Kumoko's role specifically. On her end, she's an energetic protagonist basically playing a video game, but to everyone else, she's a powerful demonic antagonist. So if that's the point, then why do we need to watch the entire story of the humans? While some of Kumoko's past actions affect them, the story is mostly politics and conspiracies among unrelatable characters that don't matter in the grand scheme of their perspective of Kumoko. So what is the actual point? Is it meant to develop these characters? Because if so, it's utterly failing. They're all fantasy tropes and don't actually seem like reincarnations at all. They're more like NPCs in Kumoko's game. This story could have been told chronologically and only from Kumoko's perspective. You can easily remove the human story and you wouldn't lose anything other than the understanding that this cute spider girl is actually terrifying to others, which is something her perspective could still accomplish and should be apparent based on her actions as well. Also, how is the big reveal of a political portrayal among the humans supposed to make any impact on me or the other viewers whatsoever if I don't care about the characters that are being portrayed? The implications of the politics serve no real purpose other than to fuel eventual battles. And maybe that would be fine if those were actually executed well. But wouldn't you know, this fucking show needed an entire episode devoted to just the humans for the big battle, and it looked like utter garbage the entire time despite that. Episode 21, titled "So I'm Not in This One, Am I?" was the absolute worst thing they could have done towards the season finale. Finding out the title of the episode alone was enough to leave me dumbfounded at what was going on. Why would you take all of your weakest elements and make it an entire episode? Follow some logic with me here for a second, okay? You're making an isekai focused on a spider girl who acts like this is a video game. You decide the best way to portray her is through 3D CGI visuals, since it'll be easier to animate her and whatever she's fighting. And you know deciding to go with 3D CGI as your main visual style means you'll probably be weaker when it comes to any 2D scenes. To contrast your energetic scenes, you have a purposely less entertaining human side story meant to build up some sort of plot. But you also understand that these human scenes and characters don't translate well as an anime, so they're all just there because they have to be. Also, this human story will be mostly told in 2D visuals. Given all of that, and you're heading into the finale of your first season, how do you leave the best impression on your viewers? A. Keep the show balanced with the perspectives, because contrast is important. B. Focus a lot more on the spider, as clearly she is carrying the show. Or C. Devote an entire episode to only the humans and act self-aware about it to try and deflect criticism. Also, it'll be partially 3D. If you unironically picked C and thought this episode did well, then there's no saving you. I'm not sorry. That episode was the worst thing I've seen in a long time. It wasn't even funny bad, it was just miserable. And to make it crystal clear how bad that episode was, the next episode immediately opens with Kumoko's raw energy single-handedly pulling the viewer back in. Never in my life has a show made me feel like I'm in some kind of abusive relationship until now. Just watch episode 21 and then episode 22, and you'll see the exact problem this show has. The human half is just so poorly executed in multiple ways. Kumoko can only do so much to save it, and I worry that won't be the case forever. There's only a couple more episodes left in the season, and I think a second season has already been confirmed, but I can't imagine it's getting any better. I want to say I won't go back for season 2, but I know this damn spider will probably convince me to try it anyways. She's probably getting her human form soon too, although I hear how it was redesigned for the recent manga adaptation is bad, and fans think the anime will do the same, and I don't really doubt that for a second. I'm more worried about whether or not her story as a human is still entertaining. Somehow I doubt it. I know the show would do that kind of thing to me. Anyways, that's all for this video. Subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, talk to me on Discord, and leave any complaints in the comments.